I'm trying to find some things from everyone here, so I know what the best information I have I can give you in the amount of time we have. So, how many people here are eating a raw food diet? And I don't mean just like tonight. Okay. How many people here are eating a diet that's not necessarily all raw, but has a lot of fruits and vegetables in it? Wonderful, wonderful. How many people here are eating a vegan diet? A vegan diet. No animals or any animal products. Okay, wonderful. How many people here are eating a lacto-vegetarian diet? Like a fake vegetarian? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's just a... How many people don't want to raise your hand? Raise your hand. Alright. How many people here just came from McDonald's? I just did. I probably visit more McDonald's than anyone else in this room. I love McDonald's. Because when you travel as much as I travel and you need a bathroom, it's a great place to go. The reason why it's so great is it's always available and they never kick you out. The reason why it's always available is because everyone's eating that food is constipated, so they're not using the bathroom. So it's like brand new. That works in every fast food store except Taco Bell for some reason. But what I see when I go to McDonald's is quite confusing. I see people online about to eat some of the worst food on the planet, and they're happy. People are happy, waiting for their Happy Meal, and everyone's happy. And that doesn't confuse me because I did that myself for many years. But what really confuses me is when I go to a health food store. Many times I see people online about to eat some of the best food on the planet, and they're miserable, and they're confused. And I couldn't figure out why that was. I thought to myself, maybe they really need the bathroom and it's not available. But then I realized the answer. Health is more than just diet alone. Health is more than just diet alone. I don't care how good your diet is. If you're not paying attention to the other aspects of health, you're not going to be as healthy as you can be. And you're certainly not going to be as happy as you can be. So we're going to talk about all the different aspects of health. Not only diet, but we're going to focus on diet because that's where people seem to be misled and messing up more than any other areas. So we're going to talk about all these areas tonight, and that's basically the topic of my new book. Now, I want to get into my background, but before I do, I can tell you, I want to clarify some things. The first thing is, I eat a 100% raw food diet, and I've been doing so for over 15 years now. Now, I don't think you need to eat a 100% raw food diet to be healthy. So I don't want anyone in this room thinking if it's all or none. If you eat a majority, maybe 70-80% of your diet, high quality, and then another 10 or 20 or 30% good high quality cooked foods, that's fine. The only reason I don't eat cooked foods is because I just don't have a desire to do so because I love raw food. If I did, I would enjoy some cooked food every now and then and I would be fine. So I want to make that clear. The other thing people always ask me is, how over all these years have I remained to stay so strict or obedient to eating a 100% raw food diet? And I'll give you several answers. The first one is discipline. I'm a very disciplined person. Now when I tell people how I eat, many times the reaction I get is, well, I'm not that disciplined, I can't do that. Let me tell you all something. We're all disciplined for what we love. We're all disciplined for what our passion is. My own brother tells me he's not disciplined enough to eat this way, but this man has a dog that he's walked every single day, 3 times a day for the last 10 years without missing one walk. That takes a lot of discipline. We all have discipline for what we love. The other thing we need if we want to be successful, other than the knowledge, the discipline, we need this other thing which really makes a difference. It comes from the title of a book I once read, one of the greatest books I ever read. It was called Enthusiasm Makes a Difference. If you truly want to do something and you want to be successful at it, you have to consistently be enthusiastic about it. Now, how many people in this room want to be healthy? Now, how many people in this room want to be healthy? Alright, that's more like it. You have to consistently be enthusiastic about it if you want to make it happen. So we have to remember those things, and we're going to talk about a lot of different things tonight. And we're going to question you tonight, so don't forget those things. Now, I'm very enthusiastic, I'm very happy, and part of that is, when you're enthusiastic, you can't help but to smile all the time. Smiling is such an important part of being healthy. I smile all the time. People think I'm either very happy or crazy. I'm actually a little of both, because they say you are what you eat, and I eat nuts. Well, let me get into my background, and then we can get into the formula for health, which I believe will help clear up confusion about health and nutrition that a lot of people are very confused with, because they don't really understand the principles to the formula for health. And a lot of people are being misled to do things that truly aren't healthy, thinking they're doing something healthy. They're being deceived. Because of deception, the doctors are making money, the hospitals are crowded, and we're not doing too well. But it's time that changed, and it's going to start tonight, right? Right. It's going to start tonight, right? I am serious when I say you have to consistently be enthusiastic about this if you want it to work. I met many people who were able to eat a healthy diet for a month, even for a year. But then when I would come back to town, they wouldn't be doing it anymore. When I ask people how many people are eating a certain diet, me. No, I am. Enthusiasm. It makes such a difference. So, how I got into this was when I was growing up, I had no intentions of being a speaker and a writer. I don't even say I'm a writer, I'm actually a typo, because I do it on a computer, I don't write it. But I had no intentions of doing that. What I had intentions of doing was I lived in New York and I was always into fitness. At 16 years old, I started working on Wall Street in the financial district, and I started working with stocks and bonds. I had a special program in high school where they let me go and do that. So my passion was just making money. At that time, I didn't know chlorophyll was the greatest green. I thought it was money. So I was just trying to make money, figure out ways to make money, and at the same time, I was getting myself sick doing it. I met many people who've been sick over the years. I've never met someone who eats worse than I used to eat. On the average day, I used to eat over 8,000 calories a day and over 300 grams of animal protein, and no produce, because I hated the taste of fruits and vegetables. This is what my average day was like. I would get up about 4:30 in the morning. I would go on a train to go to the gym to work out. I was a very fit person, I still am. But I would work out 3 days a week. I would box, and 3 days a week I would work out with the weights. I had a 9-to-5 job on Wall Street, so I would get on the train, get there, get to the gym 6:30 or so, go to the city to exercise, and I would be in the gym and be in work 7:30, 8 o'clock. I would come out of work, go under the ground in the tunnel, in the subway. Most people don't know what a subway is, unless you're from New York. They think it's just some shop to go get something to eat. I would be underground on the train, which we call a subway in New York, and then I would get out to college at nighttime. I would go to college at nighttime, then I would come home, and I would do my two favorite things. I would eat late at night and watch TV. Now, I was able to do that when I was younger, because when you're young, you could eat just about anything and feel okay. But what you eat when you're younger will catch up to you when you're older. And what you eat right now will catch up to you years from now. Another reason I was able to get away with that, sleeping a couple hours every night and doing that, is because I was living off stimulation. Now, I never liked coffee. I never drank 1 cup of coffee my whole life. But I was addicted to something called Jolt, which was like soda with like quadruple of caffeine. So I was able to get away and do this for a while. It got to a point that I have some before and after pictures in my book here where I had 2 black eyes. It wasn't from boxing, I wasn't that bad. It was from living this type of lifestyle day in and day out. It was catching up to me. But I didn't care, because I just wanted to be out there and doing my thing and so on. Until one night I was watching TV really late at night and I started to get some really bad stomach pains. So bad I had to run to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom, I couldn't stop going, and when I finally stopped going, the pains weren't going away, so I went to the emergency room at the hospital. The doctor was there that night and ran a whole bunch of tests. And the doctor says, "It appears you have food poisoning." So I went home not thinking much of it. And the following night I was watching TV, eating late at night after my long day of doing everything I was doing. I got home and the pains came back that night worse than the night before. I got to the hospital and there was a different doctor there that night. They ran a whole bunch of tests. And they says, "It appears you have food poisoning." 2 nights in a row. Now this was getting serious, because season finales were coming on. So I'll never forget, a couple nights passed by and it was the final 3rd night of that week. The pains came back worse than any of the other nights. I had to stop watching TV, run to the bathroom, and I was going to the bathroom and the only thing that was coming out was blood. Now I didn't know much about health and nutrition back then, but if I knew if blood was coming out of my body at this rate, something was wrong. I finally, I couldn't figure out what to do. I finally figured a temporary cure. I moved the TV where I could see it from the back. But I lost so much blood, I was so dizzy, I couldn't figure out what I was looking at. So I went to the hospital, and both doctors were there that night. And I said, this is getting very serious. I need to know what's going on, because reruns are coming on soon. As you could tell, I was addicted to TV. Well, the doctors ran a whole bunch of tests, and they said, we definitely know what's wrong with you. You have food poisoning. 3 times in 1 week they told me I had food poisoning. I thought one of 2 things. Either the doctors were incorrect or somebody was trying to kill me. And at that time I couldn't come up with too many people that didn't want me around back then. So I figured the doctors were incorrect in what they were telling me. And that time I had drug insurance, which a lot of people call health insurance, but I call it drug insurance, but it doesn't pay for health. It pays for drugs. So I went to this doctor near my house, and she ran a whole bunch of tests, and she finally said, we definitely know what's wrong with you. She said, you have something called inflammatory bowel disease. I was so happy when she told me that. She said, what are you so happy about? I said, I don't have food poisoning. She said, do you know what inflammatory bowel disease is? And I said, no. She says, it's also known as ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. It's inflammation of the colon, where my colon was lined with many ulcers. It was very painful. But the worst part of the disease is, when the average person has to go to the bathroom, their body gives them a signal, usually 2 to 3 hours, to say, in the next 2 to 3 hours, you better find a bathroom. When you have inflammatory bowel disease, this signals 2 to 3 minutes if you're lucky. And you can imagine me living this type of lifestyle, how this was going to mess up my rhythm. So I didn't know what to do. The doctors told me there was no known medical cure. And at 20 years old, she told me there's a high risk for colon cancer. But she said, don't worry, we have a cure for colon cancer. I said, you don't have a cure for inflammatory bowel disease, but you have a cure for colon cancer? She said, yeah, if we cut out your colon, you can't get cancer, colon cancer. And I said, I'm not cutting out anything. And she said, well, then you're going to have to take drugs. She said medicine, but I'm saying drugs was the same thing. And I said, for how long? And I'll never forget what she told me. She said, for the rest of your life. And I asked her, was there any side effects to these medications? And she said to me, possibly some minor side effects. Well, I went to the pharmacist to take it out, and I gave him the prescription, and he gave me back medicine and a paper, and on the top of the paper it said in big red letters, major side effects to this medication. And I said, I think you made a mistake. And he said, why? I said, because my doctor told me there were minor side effects, and this paper says major. He looked at the paper, he looked at the drug, and he said, no, that's correct. So I didn't know who to believe. So I took the medicine, and I found out real quickly that my doctor was incorrect. I started suffering from all these side effects. And I didn't know what to do, but at the time, all I knew how to do when I didn't feel good was go to a doctor. So I went back to my doctor, and I told her I was suffering from all these other things. So she wrote me out another prescription for the side effects to the original prescription. And I said, is there any side effects to this one? And it was like a tape recorder. She said, possibly some minor side effects. Well, I went to the pharmacist, and the same thing happened. He gave me this big paper with big red letters, major side effects. This happened several times. Before I was suffering all these side effects, I realized if I didn't die from my original illness, I was going to die from the side effects of all these other medications. I had to figure something else out. So then somebody told me that diet had something to do with my condition. So I asked my doctor, was there any connection between diet and inflammatory bowel disease? And she said there's no medical studies to prove there's any connection between diet and inflammatory bowel disease. Well, since she wasn't getting me better and everything she told me to do was getting me worse, I figured to look more into this. Somebody told me if I eliminated dairy products from my diet, my condition would begin to heal. So I asked my doctor, was there any connection between dairy products and inflammatory bowel disease? And my doctor said there's no medical studies between dairy products and inflammatory bowel disease. Here's where I got wise. I figured, since everything my doctor was telling me up to that point wasn't working, and every other doctor I went to, I saw the same people in the doctor's office, so they weren't getting cured, I figured the doctors didn't have all the answers. So I said, let me try something out and see what happens. So I decided, without telling my doctor, I would eliminate dairy products to see what would happen. Now, I didn't even know what dairy products was at the time. I knew it was milk because it said in big letters right on the container, dairy milk. But I didn't know it was ice cream and butter and cheese and all these things. And when I found that it was, I realized 80% of my diet had dairy products in it. But I was still determined to get to an answer, so I decided I would eliminate dairy products to see what would happen. And I did, and I started to feel better. So then somebody told me if I stopped eating animals, my condition would begin to continue to heal. So So I asked my doctor, was there any connection between consuming animals and my condition? Take a wild guess what she told me. Do you know my doctor? She said, there are no medical studies to prove there's any connection between animal products and your condition. When she told me this, I became a vegetarian like overnight. And it worked. I started to feel better. I was like, this doctor's amazing. Every time she told me to do something, I did the opposite and I felt better. Now, if you want to be the healthiest person in the room, you go to the most popular doctor. And whatever they say, you do the opposite. You'll be pretty healthy. By the way, are there any doctors here? Well, let me clarify something. Some doctors are wonderful and a true blessing. Emergency room doctors, cases of spinal cord injury, plastic surgery after an accident, some chiropractors and some other doctors are truly a blessing. But if we're going to put something in our body that's going to create a pain or an illness, the answer isn't taking some drug to deal with that pain. The answer is to eliminate what's causing the problem. Health doesn't begin with what you add to your diet, it's what you eliminate. So here I was now eating a vegetarian diet, feeling okay but not completely better. Now I didn't know it at the time, but I was eating a junk food vegetarian diet, falling for the same trick most people fall for. If it says organic on the box, they think it's healthy. So if you have cookies, then you have organic cookies, you think it's healthy. But guess what? It's still cookies. So I didn't know any better, and I was eating this junk food vegetarian diet, but it was an improvement than what I was eating. But I wasn't completely better, and I wanted to be. So then somebody told me stress had a lot to do with my condition. So I wanted to be sure about this, so I asked my doctor. I said, is there any connection between stress and my condition? And she said there's no medical studies to prove there's any connection between stress and your condition. So when she told me that, I knew I had to reduce the stress in my life. So I eliminated my doctor. Right away I felt better. Now let me clarify something, because I am from New York. I didn't like eliminate my doctor. I just stopped going to see her. I just want to clarify that. So here I was. I wanted to continue to eliminate the stress. I eliminated my doctor, and I wanted to move to a more stressless environment. This was about 17 years ago, and I looked all over the country, and I chose West Palm Beach, Florida. Now when I moved down there back then, there wasn't too much stress going on. People knew how to vote down there at that time. It was a very stressless environment. So I get down there, and I remember I kept seeing this van pass my house. And I remember I recognized the van every day, but it had a word on the side of it that I couldn't pronounce. So I knew it was the same van, and it was the same fella driving the van. So then finally I said to myself one day, if I see that van one more time, I'm going to follow it to see where it's going. So the next day the van comes speeding down my block, and I get in my car and follow it to see where it's going. And the van drives to the parking lot if I've ever been to a real health food store. Now I've been to many health food stores prior to that, but they were fake health food stores. Now I'm not the one to focus on the negative, so I'm not going to give you the name to these fake health food stores. I'll just give you the initials. GNC. Oh, they have that here? Okay. So the van stops, and I stop my car to see what's happening, and it's a real health food store now, and the back door swing open very slowly, and I see about 6 of the most sickly looking people I've ever seen practically fall out of the back of the van. And then the front door swings open very quickly, and I see one of the healthiest people I've ever seen come out of the front of the van, and he starts walking towards the health food store, and they start following him. So I wanted to know what was going on, so I just tagged along the back of the line, hoping.
This song, like all our songs, are dedicated to children.
So we get to the front of the health food store, and he says, I'm going to tell everyone what's healthy in a health food store and what isn't. And all I was thinking to myself was, I hope he doesn't take us over to the produce department, because I hated the taste of fruits and vegetables. Did I mention that? Take a wild guess where he took us. Right over to the produce department. And he says, here it is, fruits and vegetables. That's all you need to get better. And I said to him, what happens if we don't like the taste of fruits and vegetables? I'll never forget, he looked at me and he said, who are you? Well, I told him who I was, and I told him what I was doing there, and I said I had something called inflammatory bowel disease, also known as ulcerative colitis, and Crohn's disease, and I'd like to get rid of it. And he said, we could do that with no problem. I said, no, I don't want to cut my colon out. He said, why would you say something crazy like that? I said, because that's what my doctor told me. He said, no. He was from a place called Hippocrates Health Institute, which was a raw food health spa that I had moved right next to without even knowing what raw food was or what this place was. And that's why I kept seeing a van. And sick people from all over the world go there. Unfortunately, some go there as a last resort instead of using wisdom and going there as a first resort. But the bottom line is people go there, and on a raw food diet, they're reversing their diseases. They're reversing the condition of their health from bad to good, and so on. So I went there and I got all these books and a whole bunch of books, and I'll never forget, I was a negative thinker. I didn't always smile, and I wasn't always a positive thinker. I was a negative thinker. When I was walking there the first day, I was driving my car up there, I saw a lady in a wheelchair. And I said, this place can't be that good, this lady's in a wheelchair. So I got all these books and everything else. I went home and I read them all. By ladies named like Ann Wigmore, by Brian Clement, who was actually a fellow at the health food store, by Victoria Skovinskis, and all these other health authors. And I got all these books by them, and I went home and I spent 3 weeks just searching those books. Didn't leave my house for 3 weeks practically, just read those books. I was so excited to go and learn more about the raw food diet after reading these books and everything else. So I go there, and I remember I was driving up there 3 weeks later, and I saw what was either this lady's twin sister or this lady had a miraculous recovery, because it was the same lady running in front of the place. And me still thinking negative, I said, this place is so bad, they got a lady out of a wheelchair to run out of here. But they didn't. This lady recovered from her condition. Now, I'm not saying everyone's going to recover in just 3 weeks, but what I'm saying, I can guarantee everyone will improve from their condition if they start doing things that go along with what their body needs and not going against it. Well, that's what this lady was doing. And after seeing that and reading these books, I was excited. I was so excited and ready to do this program. I was about 99% sure. But I don't do anything unless I'm 100%. So, I was ready to eat raw foods. I had to be 100% sure, but I had to hear it from one more person that it would work. So I called my doctor up in New York City. And I said, I'm going to get well. I'm going to cure myself from inflammatory bowel disease. He said, how are you going to do that? I said, I'm going to go on a raw food diet. Will this help me? She told me exactly what I needed to hear to stay in this path. She said, there's no medical studies to prove there's any connection between the raw food diet and inflammatory bowel disease and healing it. In fact, somebody with my condition, that would be very bad and dangerous for me to do that. So when she told me that, I knew I was on the right path. That was the last time I spoke to her. I started eating the raw food diet, and people ask me how long did it take me to get well, and I give them 2 answers. My first answer is immediately. As soon as I eliminated the things that were causing my problem went away. The other answer is, after doing it all these years, is I'm still healing. Because each day I feel better than the last day. So here I was doing this, and I was so excited. Let me tell you, I was so excited. I gave a new word to the word zealous. A new meaning to this word. I mean, I was the crazy guy in front of the supermarket telling people, pointing in their baskets, telling them that they were going to die if they kept eating that food. And they were just like running away from me. And they wanted to do nothing with me. I got to be known as that crazy guy. I mean, I couldn't go anywhere. I was known as that crazy guy in West Palm Beach. It got to a point I had no friends or anyone else, and everyone thought I was crazy. I couldn't live there anymore. I had to move. I wanted to go somewhere where I fit in. So I moved back to New York City. And I promised myself I wouldn't talk about this ever again. I'll never mention about raw foods. I'll do it, but I wouldn't tell anyone about it. So here I am in New York City doing my thing, and then one day morning I was on the train going to the gym really early to go work out and exercise, and I see this young attractive lady on the train, and I figured I'd talk to her to find out how she looked so healthy. And when she gave me her answer, I thought I was on candid camera. She told me she was on a raw food diet. 5 o'clock in the morning in New York City on the subway. And I'll never forget my reply. I looked at her, and I don't know why I whispered, but I did, and I said, is anyone else doing this here? And she said she wasn't a young lady. She was a grandmother who had 3 grandkids. And she worked for the New York Transit Authority at night shift. And she was able to do that because she had so much energy from the raw food diet she was eating. And she said, and perhaps there were 2 groups that were doing this there. One of them was led by a fellow named Matthew Grace, and another of them was led by a fellow named David Joe, who to this day are still teaching these. So I went to these groups and I continued to teach raw food within these groups, but I wasn't going to talk about it outside of these groups. Until a friend of mine called me up one day who hadn't known my story, but he lost touch because he went away to medical school. And he didn't know my story, and he called me up one day and he said he had something called inflammatory bowel disease. Have I ever heard of it? And I said, not only have I heard of it, but I've cured myself of it. He said, did you get your colon cut out? I said, no. Why? He said, because in my medical school they say that's the only cure. I said, no, I simply changed my diet and my lifestyle and I got better. He said, that's impossible. I said, why? He said, it's because in medical school they teach me there's no connection between diet and the condition. I asked him if he knew my doctor. He actually didn't know my doctor, but that's what they trained in medical school. Doctors aren't trained to cure illness. They're trained to control it. They don't know. They're legal drug dealers to a certain degree. They don't know what's better or not. And I convinced him. I said, you know what? This is what I did. It worked. You got nothing to lose. Why don't you try it? So I convinced him to try it. He told me what he asked me what he should do. I said, go on a juice diet, fresh juices for 24 hours, and we'll take it day by day. And he said, you sure? I go, I'm telling you, it's going to work. We'll take it day by day. It has to be fresh juices. I said, I'll even come there and help you make the juices because I know how it is to live with this illness. He said, no, I'm a doctor. I know it all and I can take care of it. I said, call me tomorrow. That evening, his mother called me up screaming at me, telling me I tried to kill her son, and if I ever spoke to him again, she was going to call the police and have me arrested. And I didn't know what was happening, but I wasn't looking to find out so soon. Well, a couple of days later, he called me up from the hospital, and he said, I'd like you to come down here. I'm in the hospital. And I said, is your mother there? And he said, no, why? And I told him, never mind, where are you? I went to go visit him. As soon as I went in the office that day in the room, he said, that crazy thing you told me to do with your diet almost killed me. I got rushed to the hospital. I said, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I'm not going to tell anyone about this anymore. He said, but I don't have colitis anymore. I said, wait a second, it worked. He said, no, I got rushed here, and I had to remove my colon. And I said, I'm never going to talk about this again. And I never was going to mention anything about raw foods ever again until I asked him one more question. And when he gave me the answer, that changed my life. The question I asked him was, what fresh juice did you fast with? His answer, Gatorade. What fresh glow-in-the-dark blue fruit will give you glow-in-the-dark blue fruit juice? It's not out yet. I hear they're working on it. Don't be too surprised. I guarantee you the majority of people out there in the world believe that Gatorade is fresh juice because you have Michael Jordan on TV saying it's fresh and so on. People don't know the difference. Little kids think it's fresh, people think it's fresh, and it says made with fresh juice, and that's what they think. Well, we know it's not. So that right then and there, I decided I was going to spend the rest of my life, I don't care how many people call me crazy, letting people know what true health was and so on. And I was thinking, how can I get this done? How can I get this message out there? And at the time, there was a lot of these infomercials on TV. We had the Juice Man, remember that guy? With the small eyebrows and the low energy? Well, he was on TV, and there was other lady, Susan Powder, Stop the Insanity, remember her? And I was like, that's it. I'm going to have an infomercial on late night TV. I actually wanted it on daytime TV, but I didn't have the money. I'm going to have an infomercial on late night TV about the raw food diet that's going to help change everyone's health. Has anyone here seen my infomercial on late night TV? That's because I haven't had the money yet to do that either. I once asked that question and somebody actually raised their hand. It must have been a vision or something. It left me speechless. But I had to come up with the next best idea, and the next best idea was to write a book. And I traveled all over the world, meeting people who've been eating a raw food diet for many, many years, and that's when I came up with this book, The Raw Diet, The Raw Life, Becoming Natural in an Unnatural World. And there are interviews with many people who have been eating a raw food diet for many, many years. And there's also before and after pictures in here.
This song, like all our songs, are dedicated to children.
I also became a raw food chef, and there's recipes in here as well. There's before and afters, and so on. And then I went on to write this next book, Raw Knowledge. Enhance the powers of your mind, body, and soul, which is more interviews with people, other people who've been eating this way for a very long time. Then I went on to write this book, Healing Inflammatory Bowel Disease. And this book should be called Healing All Disease, actually, because the information in there will help people heal all disease. It exposes doctors and the way they treat people and so on. I think my next book might be called, If You Want to Be Healthy, Eliminate Your Doctor. And this is actually the newest version of this book. It just came out 2 days ago. I can't say it's hot off the press because I'm a raw foodist and I can't, 108 degrees off the press. But it just came out. It's brand new information. It's a completely new book. And then I had all this information out, and I was traveling all over and teaching, but for some reason people weren't getting it. People were sicker than ever. They were coming to my lecture. They'd chuckle every now and then, but they weren't going home and doing it. I wanted them to get this. So I just kept looking for the answer and looking for the answer. And it was about 6 years ago. I was in Michigan giving a lecture. And at the end of the lecture, a fellow came to me and said, Paul, your book is the second best health book I ever read. And I was curious to know what the first one was. And he said, not only will I tell you, I'll give you one on 2 conditions. He said the first condition is that before you develop an opinion about the book, you read the whole book. I said, how can I develop an opinion about it unless I read the whole book? He said the next condition is, if you don't like it, you give it back to me, but if you like it, you tell other people about it. I said, that's fine, give me the book. He gave me the book and I read the whole book, and I have to agree with him, it's the greatest health book ever written. The book was the Bible. And I found more information about health in that book than any other book ever written. And I was upset. The reason why is because 10 years prior to that, I was sitting in some doctor's office and somebody told me the same thing. And I said no thank you at that time, and I didn't read it. I would have saved myself a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of pain if I would have read it back then. All this information that I took me years to learn about health and nutrition and about what foods are best for the body and when to eat them and how to eat them and other aspects of health, the emotional and spiritual aspects of health, was all there in this one great book. But then I ran into a problem because I started to teach in churches. And to my disappointment, thinking everyone would be healthy in these places because they had this great health book right in their hands, I saw more prayer for the healing of disease than any other topic. And I was like, what is wrong? If these people have such a great health book, how come they're not getting better? And I didn't understand. Then I realized information alone without knowledge, information and knowledge without action means very little. We can't just know it. We have to take action and carry it out. And that's what people weren't doing. They had the information, but they weren't taking action to follow it. So I said something was really wrong here. So I ended up writing this book, Health According to the Scriptures, which talks about the health message found in the Bible, and it has all these scriptures in here that talk about a lot of the principles we're going to cover today in my new lecture. So I wrote that book, and I was done with writing. I wasn't going to write any more. And my personal story was becoming too long, so I had to stop inventing new things. So then what happened was I started learning the 3 true methods of healing. We're not taking drugs by the doctor, but it was the herbs, the oils, and the prayer. That's what it said in the scriptures, and that's what every health book I've ever read confirmed. The 3 methods of healing are herbs, oils, and prayer. Hippocrates said himself, let food be thy medicine. The scriptures say themselves, the medicine is in the herbs. The essential oils that come from the flowers and the herbs, that's the medicine that'll heal us. And the prayer is the greatest thing to heal us. And not only heal us, people always ask me, how can I get my family or my friends to eat this way? I just keep alienating them. Every time I try to tell them what to do, they get more pushed away. And here's my answer. You tell them once and you pray for them many times. That's it. And that works. You tell them one time and pray many times. It's the opposite of what I used to do, and I turned more people off than I care to mention about this. So then I was doing all that, and as I started praying, this name kept coming up in my mind. I kept hearing this name over and over again. And then I remembered one morning what that name was from. I had read a health book years prior to that, and it was an excellent health book. It was probably one of the greatest health books I have ever read until I had read the scriptures themselves. And the name that kept coming up in my mind was Arnold Ehret. Has anyone here ever heard of Arnold Ehret? And the name of the book that I read was this book here, probably the greatest name for a book ever written, The Mucusless Diet Healing System. If that's not a great name for a book, I don't know what is. The Mucusless Diet Healing System. And he wrote another book called Rational Fasting. Like there's any other kind of fasting, right? Rational Fasting. And then he has this book. They found this in his manuscript and translated it after he had passed on, The Cause and Cure of All Human Illness. So then he had this book out as well. And Arnold Ehret was a fellow that came from Germany, and as a young man he was very sick in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And he cured himself naturally by following the methods that we're going to talk about today in the principles of this lecture. And he came to the United States to teach everyone about this message as well. And then he wrote these books, and all of his books had something in common. He called it the formula for life. And I am convinced, I call it the formula for health. I am convinced that this formula for health, which is the premise of my new book, which I combine the information found in the scriptures, the information that I received at Hippocrates Health Institute, the information I got from all these other interviews of the people I've interviewed, and to top it all off, the formula for health. I don't care whatever diet is you decide to eat, whether it be 100% raw food diet, a regular diet that has a lot of fruits and vegetables in it, or even if it's a lousy diet. If you follow these principles, your health is going to improve. We're going to talk about the formula for health this evening. Before we get to this formula, I want to talk about what's going to motivate people the most to be healthy. Because I've learned from my doctor that opposites attract. I've learned from my doctor, if you tell somebody to do something, they like to do the opposite. People seem to be interested in the opposite. My doctor was so bad, not only did everything she told me to do have an opposite effect, but even the names of the things she told me to do have an opposite effect. I'll never forget, I was taking a test, the doctor wanted to run some tests on me and everything else. I got to tell this little story here to understand about opposites. The doctor told me we're going to have to take some tests. And remember, I didn't know anything about health and nutrition at that time. And it was the first time in my life I ever heard the words, we're going to have to clean you out. And I didn't know what that meant. I'm thinking I got health insurance, so it's not going to be a problem. So she hands me this gas tank with nothing in it except a little powder at the bottom of it. And she said, drink this. First thing she told me was I'm going to have to go on a liquid diet. And I said, I'm not into those fruits and vegetables. She said, no, a liquid diet according to doctors was Jello, coffee, and all this. I said, no problem with that. So I went on a liquid diet. I said, okay, I'm cleaned out. She said, no, now you got to drink this stuff. Now, you talk about opposites and inappropriate names for things. Not only did this thing clean me out, this drink, but it probably cleaned all the pipes in my bathroom out as well. The name of this drink was the most inappropriate name for a drink and the most deceptive name of anything. It was called Go Lightly. It made me do everything but that. A more appropriate name for this drink would have been Fire in the Hole. So I learned from the doctor that opposites had a lot to way to impact people. So I said, that's it. I want to teach people about health. So how can I teach them about health? Well, I realized the greatest way to teach people about health is teach them about the opposite of what health is. What is the opposite of health? Disease. And I confirmed this as I've been traveling and asking people why they came to a health lecture. People weren't coming to a health lecture to learn about food or nutrition. I found the most motivating reasons people would come to a health lecture, there were three, and diet and nutrition wasn't one of them. The most motivating factor people came to health lecture was, if somebody was sick, how do they get well again? That was the number one factor. If somebody had a disease, how do they get rid of it? The next motivating factor was, if somebody wasn't sick, how did they avoid getting sick? And then the third motivating factor was, how can somebody stay looking young? Now, if somebody could be convinced that diet and nutrition has something to do with accomplishing these goals, it's then they start to look at diet and nutrition. But unfortunately, a majority of people today have been convinced and deceived to believe that they can accomplish these goals without changing their diet. How do I know that? Because when I still go in these fast food places,
this song, like all our songs, are
and to know we have a disease, we have to know how to identify it. And here's where the problem came in. I would ask people, how do we know we have a disease? I would ask people, what is disease? What is disease? Disease is simply another word for discomfort. That's all it is. Disease is another word for discomfort. There's only one disease in today's world with many different stages. Doctors have given all these stages different names, but there's one disease with many different stages. The final stages are things like cancer, heart attack, strokes, and things like that. But nobody wakes up one morning and suffers from these things without experiencing the beginning stages of disease. What happens is they don't identify the beginning stages of disease, or they ignore it, and it keeps coming back worse and worse and worse. I would ask people, how do you know you have a disease? And the dangerous answer I get would be, I feel. If you're waiting to how you feel to determine you have an illness, chances are you're going to be in the later stages of disease before you even realize something is wrong. Why is that? Because when the body is toxic, it cannot give a true response. When the body is toxic, it'll give a false response. Here's an example. When I was a little kid, I could eat a gallon full of ice cream and not feel sick. Now I can take 1 tablespoon of ice cream and feel sick. The cleaner you become, the truer the response comes and your body will react to toxic things more appropriately. But when you're toxic, you can eat a lot of bad things, and your body's not going to respond, even though you're creating a lot of damage. So, by waiting how you feel is not the best way to determine that you have a disease. Remember, there's one disease with many different stages. Now, even if you suffer from the final stages, we're not going to focus on them tonight, because I believe if you look at the beginning stages, you never have to worry about the end stages. But even if you suffer from the final stages, something like cancer, understand that the body, as long as it has energy left to overcome the illness, when you start doing something right, even if it's just one little spark of energy, you can overcome any illness. And the amazing thing is, there's no medical test, there's no medical doctor out there that can tell you when the body has no energy left and it cannot come back. This is why I tell people, no matter what anyone tells you, you should never give up trying, because nobody can truly tell you when your body doesn't have enough energy to come back from any illness if you start doing the right things. And if it doesn't have enough energy left, no matter what you do is not going to work. So you might as well just do your best to try and see what happens. Somebody came to me once and said, Paul, my doctor told me I only have 3 months to live. What should I do? I said, you better go find a new doctor. Because the only thing that doctor was using to determine that person had 3 months was every person that doctor has treated with that illness only survived 3 months. That's not a very good track record. You want to go to a doctor that says you have 70, 80, 90 years, not 3 months. Remember, there's no way to accurately tell that. But if we take care of the beginning stages, we don't have to worry about the end stages. Now, if we can't go by how we feel to learn the beginning stages of disease, how can we identify this? How else can we identify we even have a disease? Well, I've been all over the world, and I've met people from many different cultures, and I've interviewed a lot of people and studied this for a long time. And I could tell you, the 2 beginning stages of disease are common just about all over the world. In fact, they're so common, they're happening to children younger and younger today. But people don't believe it because it's happening so much, people just accept it as normal. The 2 beginning signs of disease is laziness and constipation. Laziness and constipation. If somebody told you that these weren't a disease, you've been lied to. As a matter of fact, I know people that are so lazy, they're happy they're constipated, so they don't got to get up and go to the bathroom. That's how bad it's become in today's world. Now, some people want to deny that, but I don't listen to people that are full of something. But that's how bad it's become in today's world. So now we know what disease is. We know how to identify it. We know there's many different stages. Now the question is, what causes disease? Again, there's many different causes to disease. There's emotional causes, there's spiritual causes, but from a physical standpoint, what truly causes disease? And there's 2 things. There's 2 common things. Anywhere in the world, you'll find the same 2 common disease. And it's what most people are doing. That's the scary point. The 2 causes of disease, from a physical standpoint, are overeating and undersleeping. Overeating and undersleeping. In fact, you can't do one without the other. Because when you overeat, you're going to end up undersleeping, because the more food you eat, the more sleep you need. But what do people do when they're getting less sleep? Not more sleep. And they say, what are we supposed to do, stay in bed all day and quit our jobs? No, you need to find out why you need so much sleep to begin with. It's because we're overeating. Understand, sleeping is another word for healing. And when you cut your sleep short, you're cutting your healing short. People are overeating, creating more of a need, more abuse to their body, and then they're not giving their body enough healing time. The people I've interviewed in my book, they don't require a lot of sleep because they don't abuse their body on a daily basis 10 times a day by overeating unhealthy food. Overeating and undersleeping is something we have to think about. Now, many people tell me they get a lot of sleep. There's a big difference between a lot of sleep and enough sleep. And the majority of people today simply are not getting enough sleep. And the reason why is because they're overeating. Nothing takes more energy from the body than digestion. And if you don't think that's true, think about this. Somebody can eat an apple and run a marathon, but after a Thanksgiving meal, they're falling asleep. And don't blame it on the turkey, because I know a lot of people that had turkey, and there's no drug in the turkey that's making people fall asleep. It's overeating on the turkey that makes you fall asleep. Overeating is a problem. We need to do something about that. So to do something about that, we have to think, well, why do we overeat? That would be the obvious question. Why do we overeat? And there's many different factors, but from a physical standpoint, there's one reason we overeat for. We overeat because the food we're eating is low quality. When the food is low quality, even though we're taking that food in our body, if the food doesn't have the nutrients that our body needs, guess what we're going to crave? More food. And if we don't have that information and that knowledge to get something good quality, we continue to eat this low quality food, creating a deficiency in the body, making the body work harder to process it, requiring more sleep. We keep doing that and not knowing what's happening. We could starve ourselves. We could starve ourselves by overeating. And that's what's happening. We need to eat higher quality foods. Now, what is a high quality food? 5 things. Now remember, you don't have to eat 100% according to these 5 things, but the majority of your diet should consist of these things if you want to experience better health. What are these 5 things? Raw, ripe, fresh, organic, and live. Raw, ripe, fresh, organic, and live. These are the 5 things that make a high quality food. Now later we're going to talk about not only the food, but how we eat it, when we eat it, and so on. That also is important. But we're going to look at these 5 things right now. The importance of it. The first one is raw. What is so great about raw food? We hear many different things. But what is so important about raw foods? 2 things. 2 things. Liquid and enzymes. Liquid and enzymes. These are the 2 things that are important. By the way, do you know what the majority of the human body is made up of? Liquid and enzymes. These are the things that are so important in the raw foods. Now first let's look at liquids. The liquid that's in the raw foods are the liquid that has food. It's like swallowing a dry sponge. That sponge is going to come out wet, if it comes out at all. And guess what, where that liquid is coming from? It's coming from your body. It dehydrates us. The next one is enzymes. The importance of enzymes in the body is it conserves the energy of the body so the body can have that energy for other important functions. Let me give you a simple example of what enzymes do in the body and maybe you'll understand it better. Picture right here, there was a door to a room with a lock and a key on it. And you wanted something very bad on the other side. There's only 2 ways to get there. One way is to simply take the key, open up the lock, go inside the room and get what you need out of it, using very little energy and stress to do so. Now if you don't have that key, the only other way to get to the other side is to kick and break the nutrients that our body needs to thrive and survive. And when we eat foods without that, foods that are cooked and it's destroyed, what happens is the body becomes dehydrated. There's a great book out called Your Body's Many Cries for Water, which talks about the harmful effects of dehydration. When you're dehydrating, your body has to use more energy and work harder to do every other process it would have had to do if you're hydrated. Now we're going to continue with Arnold Ehret's formula for health. But we must be careful and we must remember to use technology with wisdom, and it could save our life. But if we use it with no wisdom, it can destroy our life by making us lazy, weak, and tired. The formula for health, as I said, came to me when I read this book by Arnold Ehret, The Cause and Cure of Human Illness, which pretty much sums up his other book, The Mucosal Diet Healing System and Rational Fasting. Now, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea about his book. He talks a lot about some things that have to be translated to today's times. Like, for example, he talks about eating a high fruit diet. We're going to talk about why that's not ideal today to do that. He talks about eating coffee and tea. We're going to talk about why it's not ideal to do that today. But we have to understand, over 100 years ago when he wrote this book, more than 100 years ago, those things weren't the same thing they are today. They've been so manipulated and they're so much worse for us today than they ever were. But today, his formula for health, the principles of it can still be used for the ideal health for us all. And the formula for health I'm going to give you now, and I invite you all to write it down because it's so important for all of us. The formula for health is this. Power minus obstruction equals vitality. Power minus obstruction equals vitality. Now what in the world does that mean? Power minus obstruction equals vitality. This is what it means. It means health minus disease equals wellness. Health minus disease equals wellness. Now, we might not have control over everything in this life containing to our health, but if we take care of the things we do have control over, we will never have to worry about the minor things that we don't have control over. As long as we have enough health, we don't have to worry about the little disease, and we will be in a state of vitality. As long as we have enough power to get rid of the obstruction, we will be in a state of health. So the key to health is always to have power. But once that obstruction passes that rate of power, and the obstruction becomes more than the power, that's when we suffer from the little stages of disease. And then it comes back worse and worse and worse. The key is to always make sure we have more power than obstruction. Now we start out, we don't have to do many things to be healthy. We have to do a lot of work to get ourselves sick. We have to abuse our bodies tremendously over and over again to end up in a state of disease. Because we start out with a tremendous amount of power, but then when we start letting that obstruction creep in our life, we can get away with it every now and then. Somebody thinks it's amazing that somebody could eat a raw food diet and get better from something like cancer. The real amazing thing is that somebody could eat McDonald's as long as they eat it and not get cancer. The human body is an amazing machine. It will last a long time, as long as it has enough power to do so. But when we start wasting our power, slowly but surely we're leading towards the destruction. Because once our obstruction passes that power, we're in trouble. So here we start off with a tremendous amount of power and very little obstruction in our life. Then we say, well, tonight I'm going to eat something bad. Bam, less power, more obstruction. Then we say, now if that's all we did, we'd still be in a state of health. But then we say, you know what? That was good. I'll do that again. Bam, less power, more obstruction. Then we say, well, tonight I'm going to sleep a little later. I go to sleep late at night because I want to watch something on TV. Bam, less power, more obstruction. As soon as that power is more as long as it's more, we'll be healthy. But there will come a point where that obstruction will pass that power, and we will no longer have the power to get rid of the obstruction. So the key to health, and then the more obstruction we have, the later stages of disease we suffer from. So the key to health is to always make sure we have enough power. Now the obvious question would be is, where do we get the power? And the answer is, from energy. No matter how powerful your car might be, if you don't have the gas to move that car is not going anywhere. It's the energy that creates the power to get rid of the obstruction. Now the obvious question would be, where do we get the energy from? And here's the answer. We don't get it from anywhere. We have it. We lose it when we waste the energy on things we shouldn't be doing, like overeating, not even eating the foods that are ideal for us, eating too late at night, not getting enough rest, not getting enough sleep, getting stressed out about things we shouldn't be getting stressed out about. We have all this energy, and when we waste it, we're lessening our power and building the obstruction. When we get the proper amount of sleep every night, when we eat the foods that our Creator meant for us to be foods, the fruits and the vegetables in a raw, ripe, fresh, organic, live state, every single night we will recharge our batteries, and we will always, always have enough power to create enough energy to get rid of that obstruction. Always. When I read the Bible and then I wrote this book, Health According to the Scriptures, I found two amazing things. I found many amazing things, but two of the amazing things that I wrote about was, number one, was that our Creator never wants us to suffer from disease. He wants us to be healthy. And the other thing I read was, we can die before our set time, based on the way we live and what we do. If we listen to what He told us to do, we will always have enough energy and power to get rid of the obstruction. If we go against what He tells us to do, the obstruction will build so quickly and the power will diminish, and that's where we end up in trouble. It's very simple to stay healthy. It takes a lot of work to get sick. But since many of us have gotten ourselves sick after doing all this abuse, it's going to take us a lot of work to get better again. But after all this work to get better again, we can do very little and stay healthy, if we don't start messing up again to get ourselves sick. So we have to maintain that energy. Now here's a problem. People mistaken true energy for stimulation. And stimulation is not true energy. The energy is what we get when we automatically recharge our batteries, when we get the good sleep, when we get the foods we're supposed to eat, and we eat them in the right way, and so on. Stimulation is something different. Stimulation is a false sense of energy that goes up and down and up and down, and we get it from these crazy drinks and these crazy drugs. These crazy drinks like Gatorade, if it glows in the dark, it's not good for you. It shouldn't be in your body. And then these other crazy drinks like Red Bull, one of the most dangerous things you can put in your body. You want a real appropriate name for that? Call it Red Bull something else. It's not good for us. But people are drinking these things like crazy, and it's giving them that false stimulation that I got when I was younger from the jolt. The caffeine and all these other drugs in there, yeah, we feel great. You can smoke crack and feel great, but it's not good for you. The true energy we need is always there as long as we get enough sleep and eat the right foods. Now, how can we do that from a diet standpoint and make this formula happen? This is where most people get confused when it comes to nutrition. There's 3 things we have to think about when it comes to food, and we cannot exclude one of them and pick and choose. A high quality food has these 3 things in it, and if we eat these 3 things in the ways I'm going to describe now, we will always have enough energy to create enough power to always get rid of obstruction. But when we cut these things short, that's when we start cutting our health short, and that's when we start getting sicker and so on. By the way, if you have any cell phones or pages, leave them on, I don't care. Enjoy yourself. If somebody's calling you, it might be important. Remember, we have to make sure we have enough energy to do it, and we're going to talk about now the way to eat the foods. There's 3 ways. We need to make sure we eat the foods that give our body the most nutrients while using the least amount of energy to get those nutrients while keeping the environment of the body as clean as possible. That's it. I'm going to say that again. The highest quality foods for our body are the foods that give our bodies the most nutrients while using the least amount of energy to get those nutrients while keeping the environment of the body as clean as possible. That's it right there. Now here's the problem. We'll look at each part of that. The first part is nutrition, nutrients. What food has nutrients? That's where everyone's looking today, and that's a mistake. Because everything has nutrition in it. Everything has nutrients. You could eat fruit, you could eat vegetables, you could eat bread, you could eat meat, you could eat a cardboard box. It all has nutrition. The problem is, how much energy are we using to get those nutrients? And that's the key to health. Because the key to health is conserving the energy we have. So yeah, you could eat meat, you could eat bread, you could eat all these things, and you can get nutrients from it, but you're wasting energy because you don't have to eat those things. You don't have to waste that energy because it's harder to digest. The key is eating the things that are going to digest the easiest and get the nutrients the easiest. And what foods would those be? Well, let's look at an example. Picture there was a juicer here. And picture you putting that juicer a carrot, an apple, some spinach. What you're going to get out of that is juice, liquid. And it's going to go through the juicer very simply. It's going to come out of the juicer very simply. Now, what's going to happen to that juicer if you put a piece of bread in there? Or a chicken wing? What's going to happen is it's going to start shaking and smoking, and eventually it's going to break. It's not going to last as long as it would if you put the things that go in there very simply. Your body is that juicer. Your body is that juicer, and if you want it to last longer, you have to treat it as well as possible, and that's putting the things in there that are going to go in there as simple as possible. But it's not only the food, it's also the time you eat, and what you eat, and how you eat that determines how much energy you can serve or waste. What do I mean by that? I don't care what food you're eating, I don't care how good it is for you. If you're eating food right before you go to sleep, you're wasting a tremendous amount of energy. One of the worst things you can do for your health is eat right before you go to sleep. Because that's when the body should be sleeping and resting, not digesting. But people are doing that every day, and they're running into a tremendous amount of problems. We continue to look at other reasons why we waste energy. Food combining. If you eat the proper foods in the right order and the right combinations, it digests much more easier. For example, you eat a watermelon with a cantaloupe, they both have the similar amount of liquids in it, and they digest in a similar amount of time. Now, if you eat watermelon with a banana, they're both great foods separately, but together they make the body work much harder to digest them because they have different amounts of digestive time. Another way to help the body conserve energy is take digestive enzymes with the food. It helps conserve the energy of the body like we discussed. There are many different things to do this. Another common way I found that people don't do, and remember, these are just simple ways to conserve energy with the what foods to eat, what time to eat them, how often we eat, and so on. Here's another one, is I had some dogs, and I would feed the dogs, I would put the food on the floor, and before I got up, the food was gone. And I said I'd never seen somebody eat so fast, until I went to go eat with people. we need to slow down and realize there's a saliva in our enzyme. There's an enzyme in our saliva that helps us digest the food. When we liquefy that food in the mouth, when it gets to the body, our body has to do less work. Dr. St. Louis Estes wrote a book called Raw Food and Health in the early 1900s, and it stated, any food that's swallowed, that's not properly liquefied, will putrefy or ferment in the system. In other words, it will use a lot of energy that we don't have to use. This is why juicing our foods and blending our foods are so helpful, because it's liquefied before we take it in, so our body has to do less work to break it down. But the real problem is, we simply don't chew our foods well enough. You know, I've had many dogs, and I've seen many dogs in my life. I've yet to see a dog do something that I see people do. I've never seen a dog bark with food in its mouth. But I see people talking with food in their mouth all the time. We need to chew our foods. Even if you eat fast, chew your food. I'll wait till the end of the story, chew your food. But that's what people are doing. They're not chewing their food, and then they're getting upset stomachs. They're eating right before they go to sleep. They're not eating good food combining foods. They're not eating the foods that have the liquid in them, and then they worry why they wonder why they don't feel good. So then they watch the news so somebody can tell them what they've done wrong, making it even worse. I've seen this thing on TV the other day, I couldn't believe it. They have this thing to exercise for your own stomach, and it makes you do exercise if you're too tired to do exercise. Now you just put a thing in the stomach and it exercises for you. I couldn't believe it. I was at somebody's house. They were actually eating while they were watching that thing on TV with the thing on their stomach. And they were wondering why they weren't losing weight. You know, if things are too simple, there's probably a reason why. And that's how crazy this world is today. We have to eat the foods that have the most nutrients, the fruits, the vegetables, the live sprouts. And we have to eat them in a way that's going to conserve our energy, not waste our energy. That is the key. That's two parts of it. And then the third part is keeping the environment of the body as clean as possible. The foods that will support a clean environment. I can just give you one hint. It wouldn't be dead animals. It wouldn't be anything other than fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds that produce the probiotics and the enzymes in the system to help maintain a good environment and a good body. Now, can somebody eat meat? Can somebody eat animal products and be healthy? Absolutely. Absolutely you can. If you follow all the other principles of health here, by not overeating, not eating late at night, you can certainly eat some cooked food. You can certainly eat some animals if you choose to. You can eat some bread if you want to. But the majority of your diet should be these foods that keep the environment of the system, the environment of the body clean. And those are the fruits, the vegetables, the nuts, and the seeds, and the sprouts. Now, we look at keeping the environment of the body clean, we look at two things. The first thing we look at is the bacteria in the body. If you have a healthy gut with good bacteria, good strands of bacteria, which is known as probiotics, your body is going to be in a state of health. And if you eat something bad or you have a parasite or something goes wrong, your body is going to be able to fight it off very simply. But if you have a toxic environment, if you have too much bad bacteria, it creates an environment for candidas and yeast infections and all these other things to grow and multiply. And candida, and it just takes over. The majority of people today suffer from these things because they're not taking care of the environment of their body. And the other thing it means is the condition of our blood. Dr. Otto Warburg, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, stated years ago, cancer can only thrive in a non-oxidative environment. Well, every disease, from candida to cancer and everything in between, can only thrive in a non-oxidative environment. What does that mean? That means if you have a blood system with less oxygen that's supposed to be in there because of your overeating and foods putrefying and fermenting, you're going to suffer from disease much quicker than if you had a well oxidated system, a system with a lot of oxygen in it. Well, how do we get that? We look at the foods we eat. What foods produce fermentation and what foods reduce them? Well, the foods that produce them are many different foods, but of all the foods that produce fermentation, sugar is the most deadly because it ferments quicker than any other substance on the planet. So when we eat a diet that has too much sugar in it, we run into problems. But it's not only the processed sugar. It's not only the sugar that's found in starches that convert to sugar in the body quite regularly quickly. It's also the sugar found in massive amounts in the hybridized fruit that's out there today. This is why I say the fruit is different today than it was 100 years ago. An apple is 50 times sweeter today than it was 100 years ago. And I know a lot of people that they go from eating McDonald's and then they switch to eating a lot of fruit, and that's a step in the right direction. But eventually they got to cut down on the fruit because it has too much sugar, and they have to start eating some healthier choices. The healthiest choices for our body are the sprouts. The green sprouts, the wheatgrass, the sunflower sprouts, the sea vegetables. You know, most people don't know how important these greens are and the sea vegetables are. I didn't know what sea vegetables are when I started eating this way. You know, I was asking everyone. I kept hearing, I interviewed all these people. Everyone told me to eat sea vegetables. I was going out to everyone, what are sea vegetables? And then one day somebody told me, they threw a whole bunch of vegetables in front of me. They said, you see? Sea vegetables are another way to say seaweed. They say, you mean that stuff you kick on the beach? That's exactly what I mean. And then people with the excuse, oh, I could never eat that, I hate that. And then they go eat sushi. Guess what that's wrapped in? We have to understand these things are the highest quality foods you can eat from the ocean are the sea vegetables, not the sea fish. The highest quality foods you can eat from the land are the wild edible green herbs and so on. And the sprouted nuts and seeds and fruits and vegetables and grains and beans. Sprouted, raw, uncooked. These are the highest quality. Is it available to us? Not only is it available to us, it's the cheapest way to eat, the simplest way to eat, and the quickest way to eat. You can get 1 pound of sprouts and make over 5 pounds of food. And has more nutrition than any other food you could buy anywhere. But people are just complaining and saying this and saying that and making excuses and so on. We have to understand this if we want to be healthy. We all have the capability and the opportunity to do this. We need to keep the condition of the blood clean. And we can make this happen. So now we have this formula for health. Now we have the equation to get the formula for health, eating the foods that are going to give us the most nutrients while using the least energy to get those nutrients, or keeping the environment of the body as clean as possible. And by the way, when you eat raw foods, it makes you talk very fast. But we're in the Northeast, so I can get away with that. So we need to make sure we do this. Now I'm going to give you 4 steps to make this happen. I'm going to give 4 steps how we can all start this in our lives immediately. Step number 1. Eliminate the cause. Eliminate what caused the problem, and the problem will begin to go away. Eliminate the cause. That's step 1. It doesn't only have to be food, but it usually is food. We need to eliminate the cause, and the problem will begin to go. I don't care how good you eat. If you're going to work every day doing something you don't like to do, you're not going to be as healthy as you can be. Then some people say, oh, I can't change my job. Well, the excitement alone from looking for a new job can change your health. We need to get those things out of our lives that are stressing us out so much and are building out obstruction. So step number 1 is to eliminate the cause. And remember, I'm going to have a book out one day. If you want to be healthy, eliminate your doctor. That's going to come out. Step number 2. Cleanse and rebuild from the damage you've already created. Cleanse and rebuild from the damage you've already created. Now this could be 2 steps, because when you're cleansing, your body's automatically rebuilding. But it's 1 step, because when you're cleansing, it's rebuilding automatically. It's not separate. Now there are many different ways to cleanse. There's colonics, there's enemas, there's massages, there's oils, there's herbal programs, there's many different ways to cleanse. But the greatest way is free, and everyone loves it. It's called sleep. When you're sleeping, your blood in your body is cleansing. It's the greatest cleanser out there. I don't know why so many people love it so much, but they cut it short every night and every morning. We need to cleanse and rebuild from the damage we've created. That's step number 2. The body has amazing powers to overcome everything if we just do those 2 steps alone. I actually met a fellow. I'm going to tell you some stories right now about some people I met. I met somebody in Phoenix a couple of months ago. Man had more energy than just about anyone I ever met. Man's 107 years old. Yeah. And he has great energy, great health. I've heard even more stories about that, but this is an amazing thing. Is it really amazing? Well, the scriptures tell us we should be living to 120. We look at that. The other night I was hanging out with a person. This is how amazing the human body is. This person, in an accident, cut their finger off. They cut their thumb off at the knuckle. And they went to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, we'll just chisel it down and make it a half a thumb and so on, and then that'll be done. But this man knew better. It's like he heard something in the background saying, dum, dum, dum. But this man knew better. He said, no, I'm going to take care of it myself. And this man has experienced a tremendous amount of healing over the years to know what to do. This man has pictures, and this has only been 1 month now, where his thumb is growing back. He said, here's the original cut line, here's where it's grown to now. His thumb is growing back. It's amazing what the body can do when we simply eliminate what causes the problem and cleanse and rebuild from the damage we've created. You know, I wanted to give him a sign of encouragement, but I wasn't going to give him a thumbs up. But it's so important. He told me today, he said, well, I didn't have a ride home from the hospital. I said, what did you do, hitch a ride? But it's amazing what the body can do when we let it, when we interfere, something else happens. So step number 3, create a diet that works best for our own individual chemistry. Create a diet that works best for our own individual chemistry. Now you might be thinking, I thought you said raw foods were best for us. What do you mean create a diet that works best for us each individually? What I mean is, I could tell you to take a lot of supplements, I could tell you what foods are best for you and what you particularly need for your individual situation, but I can tell you that, but it wouldn't be true unless I did one thing. The body has a messenger, a true messenger. The true messenger of the body is the blood. And by looking at the blood on a chemistry level, you could tell exactly where a person is and where a person is going. A good friend of mine, Dr. Shandell in Hollywood, Florida, he's a chemist, he has a laboratory. He says, there's so many people that think they feel great, but remember what I said about feeling? Your body can truly react, but then when he looks at their blood, they're a wreck. And he has a longevity blood profile test that could tell somebody 10 years prior to them getting cancer, if they keep doing what they're going to do, they're going to get cancer. Even though they feel great, they're heading for it, but just looking at their blood, he could tell. Now, if you're monitoring your blood, and you know exactly what's going on in your body, you know what nutrition you need, and so on, then the first place you should get those nutrients is from food. Then after that, you can get it from a whole foods in a supplement form. Then after that, you can look for other supplements. But the majority of us don't have any idea. I'm not going to tell you to take a certain nutrient because the last 10 people I saw needed it. I'm going to say, no, let me see your blood work, and then I'll tell you. So go and get a simple blood test. Now, be careful, because doctors don't know how to read this blood test. The doctor will say, everyone looks high, and you're just average. They'll say, oh, you're really low. They don't know. So you have to get that blood test and go to somebody who knows how to read them. I know a lot of people I've interviewed in this book, Dr. Shandell in Florida, Dr. Fred Bishy. You can mail your blood work to all these people. Now look at it. Hippocrates Health Institute, for over 50 years they've been doing this, and if anyone goes there for their 3-week program, they'll look at your blood work for the rest of your life. They'll go over the results with you. I want to talk about the Hippocrates program because there are people out there now that have been eating a raw food diet for like a year or 2 years, and they think they're some guru. You know, if somebody comes to me and they have inflammatory bowel disease, or they just want to learn how to eat better, I'll help them. But if somebody comes to me with cancer, I'm not going to help them. I'm going to send them to Hippocrates Health Institute, or somewhere who has the experience and knows, because this isn't a little tricky game here. This is a serious thing. You need to get to these places. I have brochures back there for Hippocrates Health Institute. If you want to call them up, their phone number is 561-471-8876. I don't work for them. I promote them because I know it works. Because I go there all the time, I volunteer my time there, and I teach there, and I see the people just like that lady in the wheelchair getting better if their body has the energy to do so. I said to the owner there, I said, I would love to get people here, how can I encourage them to do so? He said, offer them a discount. If anyone goes there and mentions my name, Paul Nison, they will give you 5% off. And trust me, that's a good discount. Anything I can do to help you, I will visit you when you're there, if I'm in town, and I will talk to you and help you. And when you leave there, I will continue to work with you and make sure you're on the program and answer your questions. I was sick, and I know how it is to be living with a deadly disease. I might be joking tonight, but I'm not doing this here to get laughs. I'm doing this here to save your life. I want to see you get healthy. And I want to see you tell other people how to get healthy. If the doctors aren't doing it, I go to hospitals all the time to visit my friends. And I always go there and they always say to me, are you still eating that crazy diet? I'm going there to visit them. And then they're sending me to the basement to get them some McDonald's or something that's in most hospitals today. It's actually not McDonald's in the basement, it's on the first floor, but if you eat too much of that food, it'll put you in another room in the basement. That's how crazy these hospitals are today. We have an opportunity to get well again. Create a diet that works better for your own individual chemistry. These brochures are in the back, my information's in the back, and I want to give you my contact information right now, and then I'm going to tell you step number 4, and then I'm going to take questions and answers. If you want to get in touch with me, my website is paulnison.com. www.paulnison.com. And I have a web store where you can buy my books and so on at rawlife.com, rawlife.com. And I have a non-profit organization now, a non-profit ministry, which is toralifeministries.org. Torah lifeministries.org. I say that's a new non-profit, but I've really always been non-profit because I've been doing this a long time and I never see a profit. but more than anything you can do for me is just pray that this message reaches the people it has to reach to and everyone gets it that needs to get this message. You can call me up. I have a toll-free number, 866-RAW-PAUL. Now, if you don't remember that, I sell some special pills for your memories. 866-RAW-PAUL. Any way I can help you, I offer myself to do so. Now, my first 5 books have been self-published. My next book is published, A Formula for Health. It's not here tonight because I'm working with a publisher for the first time. But it is coming out in the next 2 weeks. And if anyone wants to order it tonight and pay for it, I can have it sent right to you, right from the publisher. And you'll have it before anyone else. So I'll be back there later. I have some of my other books here for sale. But if you want to get that book, you can do so. I'm excited I'm working with the publisher for the first time because I can keep the cost as low as possible. And it's only $12.95 for that book. So I'm really excited for that. And a couple all the information I spoke about here tonight. But I don't care if you don't buy it, at least go to a bookstore and just read it and leave it on the shelf. But read this information and get this information out. When you're done, don't let it sit on the shelf. Get it out to other people. Pass it along. And keep getting this information out. And you'll be glad you did and you soul will your body. Now step number 4, which can actually be step number 1. Do not neglect the emotional and spiritual aspects of health to go along with the physical. You know, I see many people that are sick and they're only looking at diet, they're not looking at the other areas. I can tell you, emotionally and spiritually, a lot of people are way off base. And until I started to realize that, that's when I started to experience true health. So do not neglect the emotional and spiritual aspects to go